The young Earth was dying. Not from fire, and not from age. It was dying of thirst. The great riverbeds meant to carry the heavy lifeblood of the newly formed world were reduced to cracked networks of dry, hardened mud that sliced the feet of anything that walked across them. Forests turned to ash under their own weight, their deep roots curling into brittle dust beneath the soil. The humans and beasts who walked the dirt looked at the sky, waiting for the mercy of rain, their throats parched and their eyes hollow. But the sky remained entirely, mercilessly empty. Days bled into months, and the terrible heat only deepened, baking the stones until they cracked open. The water had not evaporated. It had not vanished into the void. It was stolen. Deep in the northern mountains, a shape rested in the dark. It occupied the deep valleys, spilling over the jagged peaks and choking the ravines. This was Vritra, the Encloser, the great serpent of the early world. He was a creature born of the deep earth, a nightmare of pure scale. And he had swallowed the clouds. He had dragged his endless coils across the source of the world's rivers, sealing them tight beneath a mountain of impenetrable scales. The water was trapped inside the stone, screaming against the rock, pressing with the weight of oceans, but nothing could break through. The Encloser simply rested his heavy head upon the peaks and closed his eyes. Vritra wanted nothing. He built no empires and asked for no altars. His only weapon was his suffocating mass. He was the gravity of stagnation. By doing absolutely nothing, he was starving creation to death. Hatred requires energy. Vritra was the ultimate physical dam, an immovable wall of flesh and scale. The early gods watched the earth wither from their vantage point. They possessed authority, but they quickly realized that authority means nothing to a creature that refuses to move. The gods sent warnings on the high winds, but the mountain did not flinch. Their threats meant nothing to a beast perfectly content to wait until the world died. A terrifying truth settled over the divine council. The young universe could not survive on order and quiet laws alone. Sometimes, to create a flowing, living world out of dead stone, you must introduce total, devastating violence. They needed a breaker. They needed the storm. They needed Indra. Before this moment, Indra was a force of the high air, wild but untethered. But looking down at the sheer mass of Vritra wrapped around the spine of the world, even the storm god knew that bare hands and sharp winds were not enough. You cannot punch a glacier into submission. Steel and bronze were useless against the Encloser. The gods had thrown their spears, and the weapons simply shattered against the unyielding wall of serpent scales, falling into the dust as broken iron. A dam made of earth and flesh could only be broken by a weapon made of raw sky. So Tvashtr, the divine smith and architect of the early universe, stepped forward. He walked into the heart of the blackest storm clouds, reaching his bare hands into the screaming, electrified air. He dragged blinding lightning out of the sky and forced it down onto his anvil. For days, the heavens shook with the deafening rhythmic sound of his hammer striking light. The heat of his forge burned away the remaining clouds. He took the unbending laws of nature and sharpened them. He forced the chaotic heat of the storm into a rigid physical shape. He forged the Vajra, the thunderbolt, the universe's first weapon of total ruin. It was jagged and burned with a cold light. When Tvashtr handed the weapon to the storm god, the metal hissed against Indra's skin, smelling of burning ozone and scorched iron. The divine smith looked at the young warrior, his face grave. "This will break the coil," Tvashtr warned, the sound of the forge still ringing in his voice. "But it will also break the silence of the world. Once you strike, there is no returning to peace. You will bring the rain, but you will also become the terror." Indra accepted the weapon. He did not walk down to the mountain like a king inspecting a border. He became the storm. To match the mass of the great serpent, Indra required a catalyst. He took the heavy, intoxicating sap of the soma plant and crushed it between his hands. He swallowed the bitter golden liquid, letting a violent, burning heat flood his chest. The soma was not a mere drink, it was an ascension. The fire forced his body to expand, his bones hardening into bedrock, his shadow lengthening until it darkened the wide valleys. He grew in density, his sheer presence causing the dry earth to tremble beneath his feet. The other gods watched him from a great distance. As they looked at Indra, his eyes wild with the burning soma, his hand gripping the jagged light of the Vajra, they felt a sudden cold dread in the pit of their stomachs. They realized with clarity what they had just done. To kill the beast starving the world, they had been forced to build a monster of their own. They were unleashing a force of violence that could never be put back in the box. The storm god had become something deeply unsafe, a living weapon walking across the fragile earth. Indra stood before the mountain of scales, the sky above him bruised purple and black, heavy with the unreleased storm. The air grew so dense it snapped the surviving trees in half, their dry wood echoing like breaking bone in the empty canyons. Slowly, the size of a cavern, Vritra's yellow eye opened. The serpent looked down at the glowing figure standing in the dust. The Encloser offered no threat. He only shifted his suffocating mass, grinding the stone beneath him as he pressed harder against the trapped rivers. His defense remained his utter apathy. He dared the storm god to try and break the unbreakable. Indra raised the Vajra high above his head. For a long, silent moment, the universe held its breath. Indra felt the crushing weight of the thunderbolt in his hands. He knew what Tvashtr had meant. The strike would unleash the water, but it would also introduce the law of ruin into the world. There was no gentle way to unmake a mountain. Indra did not deliver a clean, heroic strike. He brought the weapon down like an executioner's axe. The thunderbolt hit the serpent with the force of a falling moon. The sound shattered the long silence of the early universe, a concussive, deafening blast that cracked the sky itself and threw the watching gods to their knees. The blow did not merely sever flesh and scale, it shattered the law of obstruction. The mountain cracked open down to its deep roots. The coils snapped in an explosion of blood, scale, and shattered rock, going slack against the smoking stone. And then, the roar of the water began. The rivers, trapped in the dark for an age, shattered the ruined corpse of the serpent. It was not a gentle, weeping rain. It was a chaotic, destructive flood of life. The water ripped down the mountainsides, carving deep, permanent gouges into the earth. It dragged giant boulders and shattered trees in its wake, flooding the dry plains and violently washing the ash away. The starving humans, who had prayed so desperately for water, ran in absolute terror as the frothing wall of the flood tore through their valleys, drowning the very land it was meant to save. It was a brutal return of movement to a dead world. Salvation had come, but it had come with teeth. Indra stood in the deep mud, watching the violent water rush past his knees, stained red with the blood of the Encloser. He had broken the obstruction. He had saved creation. But as the flood slowly settled into wild rivers, the air around him had permanently changed. The other gods looked down at Indra. They did not cheer. They did not descend to crown him. They saw the heavy blood dripping from the Vajra. They saw the casual ease with which he had broken the spine of the world's largest creature. Before this moment, the gods and the earth had been intimate. They had walked close to the dirt. But the sheer force required to break Vritra proved a terrifying fact. Heaven was capable of slaughter. Indra was now too loud, too heavy, too dangerous to walk among the fragile, growing things of the earth. The blood on the stone changed the ancient treaty. The gods looked at the ruined mountain and realized their presence was now a fatal threat to the fragile earth. Slowly, deliberately, out of self-preservation and deep fear, they pulled away. They ascended. They withdrew their presence from the soil and built their halls high above the clouds, leaving the humans behind on the wet, recovering earth. The rivers flowed at last, but the sky had closed its heavy doors. The earth was alive, but it was deeply isolated. The humans stood in the mud, looking up at the vast, empty distance between themselves and their creators. They had the water they needed to survive, but they were entirely cut off from the beings who had saved them. The gods were too far away. A human voice could not shout loud enough to reach the new high heaven. The gap was too wide. They needed a messenger. They needed something that lived in the dirt but knew exactly how to climb into the sky. They needed fire. And if you want to follow the flame and see how a simple spark became the mouth of the gods, stay with Mythkipedia.